Okay, hello everyone, welcome back. Long time no see, I know it's been a little bit. After I post a video, I just need to collect my thoughts for seemingly a whole month. Anyways, I needed to collect my thoughts again, but I am back with part 3 of our Hunger Games name meaning video. Today we're going to be going over districts 9 through districts 13. So I would say we have some pretty heavy hitters up in here that we're going to go over, and I am really excited to talk about. Part 2 was fun and interesting, but this is where I think Suzanne really plotted and schemed, because some of these knife to the heart. Let's get into it. All right, we're gonna start with District 9. District 9 is grain. These first two names I think are from Sunrise on the Reaping. They're the district tributes for the 50th Hunger Games. I wasn't able to find much, so I'm taking from the Hunger Games Wiki for both of these because that made the most sense. So we have Ryan first. So it says Ryan is an Anglicization of the Old Irish name Rain. The exact meaning of this name is uncertain, but it's often explained as the meaning of Little King. However, in this case, Ryan was chosen as it sounds familiar to rye, a plant known for its grain. And then we have Kurna. My mind immediately goes to kernel, like corn kernel. That's what it says on the Hunger Games Wiki as well, the kernel or the core part of the grains. When I looked it up, Kurna also means tough or a hard-headed individual. We see that District 9 is kind of this neutral party a little bit. When they were figuring out alliances between the careers in the lower districts, District 9 kind of kept to themselves at first until District 1 retaliated. So in terms of either stubbornness or self-preservation or just not understanding the name of the game when it comes to the Hunger Games, I think this hard-headed mentality is a little bit there, but what do I know? We have Clayton next. This comes from an Old English word, cleag. This means clay and ton, or settlement or town. Hence, Clayton originally refers to a settlement near clay deposits. Now, if I'm putting two and two together here, I'm pretty sure that clay and nutrient-rich soil is good for growing crops, so connection. Next we have midge. Midge is described as a small bird that stays around marshy areas. I think marshlands are known for having pretty nutrient-dense soil, so if Suzanne is really taking it as far as I am making her take it, this checks out. Our next name is the Winciest bit confusing for me a little bit. I originally thought it was an anagram where it's like you jumble the letters around, because Suzanne has done that with some of the other tribute and character names I've talked about. But we're talking about Panlo, P-A-N-L-O. This is from the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I thought it was the anagram of Plano, which is describing a flat or level area of land. But I think the Hunger Games Wiki clears for this one, because they claim it comes from the word, that's gonna sound dirty if it comes out of my mouth. That's the Latin word for bread. Some people say it also comes from the word panem was based off of, so maybe that's a little breadcrumb. I don't know. We also have sheaf from the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes as well. This is a bundle of grain stalks laid lengthwise after reaping the grain. On to the next. In doing this series so far, I feel like I've learned so much about different aspects of different things. I know that is so descriptive, but it's true. All right, we've got District 10, which is livestock. The first name is buck, which is another word for a young male horned animal that is either like a deer or an antelope, that genre of horned animal. Then we've got Lanny. This is renowned land, or that's what it meant when I looked it up. It comes from Old English, Irish, Gaelic origin, which is kind of the same story for a lot of these names. I couldn't necessarily find a tie to livestock with her name, so we're just gonna keep the bus moving because I know y'all are here for the next 3 districts. We've got stamp, which means to pound or crush with a pestle or a heavy instrument. My guess would be in relation to livestock. Stamp is kind of interchangeable with brand, and obviously farmers will brand animals as a symbol of ownership over them. It's kind of a... Paper stamps are just a symbol of properly registered and paid for mail, which is kind of along the same line as animals, I guess. Stamped animals, branded animals, belong to one person. I am just gonna keep it rolling. We'll be talking about stamps for the next hour. Peeler. This took a little bit of digging because obviously your mind goes to the peeler for like produce, potatoes, that kind of thing. Peeler, the machine, peels the leather away from any remaining flesh after it's dried. It also assures, at least with modern day peelers, an even thickness and length when cutting leather. Next we have tanner, from the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. If you guys have ever played One Night Werewolf, there is a tanner card in there and it makes everything crazy. That's not what I'm referring to here. Tanner or a tanner is someone who tans or dyes and dries the hide and leather. The process of making shoes, belts, bags, whatnot. They use tannin or tans, which is just powdered tree bark. That is so interesting to me, to essentially dye and continue the process of leather making. Apparently in France, it was looked down upon because it was a poor man's craft. But hey, that is ingenuity at its finest. Our final name for District 10 is brandy, which I think is just a play on branding, or the act of what a farmer does to stamp or mark an animal under their ownership or care. I'm excited for this one. We have arrived at District 11. District 11 is agriculture. The first name I found was hull from Sunrise on the Reaping. This is just another word for the husk or kind of protective outer layer we see on corn and other crops, or seeds and things like that. Strictly with farming in the United States, it refers to that kind of leafy protective outer layer. I know this word is kind of interchangeably different in the UK from what I was looking at. There's also the hull of a ship, but I think that's more with District 4, so we're gonna null and void that one. Next we have chicory. The chicory plant is a blue-flowered Mediterranean plant in the daisy family. I guess this flower or plant, its leaves are edible and often used in salads. We have tile. Everyone's mind goes to bathroom tile. I think this is more referring to more of a modern-day farming practice where there are different canals built underneath a field to kind of outsource either excess water or make sure it's on like a drip line where it's getting even amounts of water so that the crops can grow and not be drowned. Obviously with modern technology, this is done with pipes and stuff. Before then it was done with channels. Blossom from Sunrise on the Reaping. This is a verb meaning to produce flowers, blossoming, so to speak. It's an Old English word that also comes from German and Dutch roots. I'm gonna put some of the words right here. I am Dutch. I wish I knew how to speak Dutch. All right, I'm gonna go back to back with these 3. We have chaff, cedar, and thresh. We meet chaff and cedar in Catching Fire as they were pulled for the 75th quarter quell. Chaff is referring to the husks or leafy part around the corn, kind of what I was talking about with the hull earlier. You use the act of threshing to pull apart those husks from the corn or other produce. In English slang, it also means someone who jokes with naturedly. I think this relates to his character. We see Haymitch have really good interactions with chaff and cedar, insinuating that they are friends, and at least in the movies that they've been over to Haymitch's house because Haymitch makes the joke about them drinking his alcohol. So in that aspect, I think it's a good-natured joke. One of the first times we see Haymitch kind of have a lively interaction with someone. We have Cedar, which is Chaff's female partner in the 75th Hunger Games. Cedar is a machine or a process of manually putting seeds into the ground. It's either a person or object that does it. It also refers to a plant that produces seeds or pollen in a particular manner or condition. So cedars are those who kind of have a certain season. I'll put some examples right here. Then we have thresh. Thresh is an action in terms of agriculture or farming. It separates the plant or the husk of the grain from the plant itself, typically by either using physical force or a revolving mechanism. While I was trying to get more of a symbolic meaning for Thresh's name, I saw that there were some theories about whether or not Cedar and Chaff were Thresh and Rue's mentor in the 74th Hunger Games. I know there's not a lot of evidence to back that. I did see someone on Reddit claim that Katniss had asked Cedar and Chaff about Rue and Thresh's family. I would need to fact check that myself. Chaff, Cedar, and Thresh's names are all really closely tied together in terms of agriculture compared to some of the other names I'm about to talk about and the ones I already have. So if that were the case and they were mentors to Thresh and Rue, I think that would be a little bittersweet. There's a whole debate on this Reddit thread. I'll actually put it in the description down below so you guys can read it, because I'm always diving down Reddit rabbit holes, debating on whether those we see in the 75th Hunger Games were mentors to who we meet in the 74th. Now we're gonna get into the thick of it. Oh, my precious Rue. I don't think there's one time I've watched the first Hunger Games movie or read the first book without crying. Like, I already know what's gonna happen. I've already reread them, rewatched them every time. And this meaning right here twists the knife. In British, and just as a noun, it means to regret. It's often known as a symbol of regret. A more concise definition of that is bitterly regret something one has done or has allowed to happen. That was the first thing out of the chute, and that obviously makes me think of Katniss and Rue's relationship, because Rue is one of the first characters that kind of haunts the narrative throughout the Hunger Games until the beast that is Lucy Greybeard. It wouldn't be far off to claim that because Rue is haunting the narrative, she's also this embodiment of guilt and regret, specifically towards Katniss, because Katniss was the one who had the strongest bond with her outside of Thresh. Rue represents the guilt Katniss feels as having to perform for the Capitol, going on this victory tour. And specifically her speech on the victory tour is one that I always remember. She specifically talks about how she sees Rue in the flowers outside of her house and how she sees Rue and her sister. Katniss is battling with wanting to be free and do her own thing and not have the pressures of the Capitol looming over her shoulder and the threats that they've made to her, but also to get revenge for the things that have been taken from her. On the flip side, Rue is also a healing herb, coming from the Greek word ruta gravelins, ruta meaning to set free. This is also a main ingredient in certain mixtures and used as an antidote a lot of the time, specifically for different types of poisoning. While Rue kind of represents this guilt and bitterness embodied through Katniss, we see Rue actually heal Katniss physically in the first Hunger Games after she gets attacked by the Tracker Jackers when taking out the careers. I actually made a shorter video about Rue's name and posted it on TikTok, and one of the things I was also thinking about was how when Katniss sings to Rue in her final moment, she sings Deep in the Meadow. And I've seen a few people point this out. I don't know if this is actually canon, but the entirety of that song is the directions to the Covey's grave, seeing that that was revealed in Sunrise on the Reaping. I would like to think that Rue's name meaning to set free, and just all of the other symbolism of her name so far, that Katniss was unknowingly telling Rue somewhere where she can rest peacefully without the watchful eyes of the Capitol or anything like that. So before I tear up, that is my final thoughts about Sweet Rue. We're buckling up for this one. Reaper was one of my favorite characters in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. His name also shows the thoughtfulness of his character. The dictionary defines Reaper as a person or machine that harvests a crop. So in terms of agriculture, something that cuts down crops. It also has another connotation, which is the Grim Reaper, which I think is a little more widely known, or someone with a cloaked skeleton wielding a scythe. A scythe is also a tool used to cut down crops as well. I think it's interesting because the Grim Reaper comes from different distinct points in history. The black cloak or coat was associated with the Black Death or the bubonic plague, and this is kind of how black started being associated with funerals and deaths starting from the 14th century, but more popular in the 19th century when the bubonic plague was taken out the majority of the European population. It is also associated with Cronus, or a Greek titan. Cronus is associated with the harvest, or Kronos, the god of time. With both of these contexts, we see that Reaper has agricultural ties back to his district, as well as the symbolic ties that his character portrays in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I personally took his character as representing the inevitability of death. His character in the movie obviously accepts death with open arms after the giant can of snakes was dropped into the arena. He was also kind of committing acts of rebellion in the capital I's throughout the entirety of the games. And in that sense, Reaper somewhat acts as the Grim Reaper throughout the game, seeing as he collects all of the bodies and covers them, and he's the only one that touches the other tributes. I think at one point Lucy Gray tries to help him, and in the books Reaper is already sick at that time, dealing with kind of delusion, delirium, and so he doesn't allow her. But I think that also has kind of an underlying symbolic meaning as well. On the Hunger Games Wiki, it is mentioned that although Reaper was kind of collecting the bodies and having this silent mass for them, he did not kill a single person in the 10th Hunger Games whatsoever, which I think is a cool non-parallel of his character. Next up, we have ash. Ash is known as the powdery substance that's left behind after something's burned. In terms of agriculture, it's not uncommon for farmers to burn down the crops that have not been harvested at the end of the season, seeing as a lot of times the nutrients from burning down crops actually helps the next season be more fruitful. Ash Wednesday, in terms of Christianity and Catholicism, has a lot of symbolism and meaning. It's the first day of Lent in Western Christianity, and this specifically serves as a reminder of your mortality on this earth. And Ash Wednesday before Lent starts is an opportunity to repent for any past wrongdoings and profess your devotion to God. This kind of aligns with what we saw from the meaning of Reaper's name. I think mortality and just the overall meaning of life is a huge underlying symbolism throughout the games. It's very interesting to see this be portrayed with the names. Another note I have written down here is idea of the inevitability of death, especially with what we know as the reaping day. Reaping itself means to cut or to gather. To reap is to collect. A lot of times reaping the benefits has a positive connotation. There is no positive connotation for that in the Hunger Games whatsoever. I guess in a way the Capitals can view it as a positive thing, seeing as they're getting retribution for the rebels' acts during the war. So it's like the Purge. Next we have dill, which was Reaper's district partner in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Dill is an herb known for its freshness, vitality, and pleasing aroma. I think of dill pickles, obviously. Origins go back to the medieval era. I think this is kind of an opposition with Dill's character in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Dill is already sick with either pneumonia or some kind of lung something when she goes into the games already, and seeing that dill is known for its freshness possibly is intentional on Suzanne Collins' part. I wish she would just come out with a podcast or something. We are at District 12. As we all know, District 12 is known for coal mining. One of the first names is Wyatt Callow. Wyatt in French means guide. Wyatt Earp is a Western American figure known as a lawman and a gambler. In English, Wyatt means one who wins wars, and it's derived from the medieval name Wyatt. His character in Sunrise on the Reaping is described as somewhat of an odds maker. While his family are known as the ones being the gamblers and putting money down on this, he is known as the one who's kind of tallying the marks and the money put down. Callow means someone who is immature or inexperienced, and with the information that we learn in Sunrise on the Reaping that he is not actually a gambler, I think this is very fitting. He explains how he is not the one who is intentionally doing the gambling, as they all kind of see it as a effed up thing, especially when it comes to betting on tributes and the fact that Wyatt's family was most likely betting on him as well. Going back to what I first said about Wyatt meaning guide, I think Wyatt's character in Sunrise on the Reaping serves as a fresh set of eyes for the tributes that we see from District 12. They have no idea what to expect. Wyatt also has no idea what to expect, but he kind of helps them understand it from a numbers point of view, which is never something they've experienced before. Next we have Luella. This one is incredibly interesting. If you've read the books, you will know where I'm going with this. So Luella means famous warrior. It stems from a few different names: Louise, Louis, and Ella. Ella meaning fairy maiden, the famous warrior stemming from the first part of her name, Lou. These both come from German and Hebrew backgrounds. I also found sources, and the only reason I'm including this is because of Luella's character arc throughout the book, claiming that the name Luella means all or complete, or the complete version of something. Lulu is a hijacked version of her and no longer the true Luella. The shoe fits. I'm going down a rabbit hole here, stemming from Lou. I mentioned the name Louise, which means famous warrior. The name is popular because it kind of describes someone who stands their ground and someone who has courage. It also could be referencing Scout from To Kill a Mockingbird, seeing as she kind of has this fiery character and fiery spirit about her as well. And Haymitch describes Luella as somebody who kind of takes no McCoy. I looked up McCoy name meaning, and then usually I'll go down different pockets to see if my sources are correct or not. The first result that comes up means the real thing or the genuine article. I think that is enough said, because Luella McCoy is a real thing and Lulu is not. Anyways, stems from the phrase the real McCoy, or coined as a phrase. Lou is kind of on the same par here. I already mentioned this. When I look up Lou, it says that it comes from German origin, on the same par as famed warrior. I also saw one source say this, and I don't know if there's any backing to this, but it says that Lou could also be from the Latin word of lupine, which means wolf. Luella and Lulu's story is kind of like a sheep in wolf's clothing, wolf in sheep's clothing, imposter syndrome going on here, which I think is incredibly interesting if that were the case. I know this is a crazy stretch, so do not quote me as canon. I'm just drawing parallels where I see them. Yeah. I think Lulu is as strong as she could be in that situation, kind of like a shell of a person being controlled by the capital. Some of the things that she does do in her little acts of rebellion and communication with Haymitch and some of the other characters shows how strong of a character that she is, even though we never get to figure out her real name. I'm getting shell shock right now, PTSD. I may have to make a whole nother video on some of the Covey's names, like Lenore Dove and Lucy Gray. There is so much to their names. I know there's another creator here on YouTube who has an awesome video about it, and she goes in incredible depth, and I do not know if I would be able to top that. Her name is Dove Makes on TikTok and on YouTube. We're gonna dive into Katniss's family here a second. I'm gonna start with Astrid, her mom, as we have been revealed the names of her parents in Sunrise on the Reaping. Astrid is a clade or an umbrella term for a family of flowers and different plants. It ranges from roots to herbs to fruit. All of those things are underneath a clade. Seeing that her mom is kind of an herbalist or a physician of sorts, as much as you could be in a district without any modern medical care, I think this is on par with Astrid's character. We see her take care of Gale after he is whipped in the square. Now we have Burdock. Burdock is a root native to kind of the same area as Katniss. Burrs are referring to the spiky part of the root, dock being the leaves and the stem. The symbolic meaning of burdock is protection and purification. Some claim that using a burdock will rid you of any negative energy. Seeing as we get a little bit more insight as to who he was, he seemed like a protective father, a protective husband from Haymitch's point of view, and seeing how destroyed Haymitch was, I think that means a lot. He was always bringing Astrid different herbs and things he would find when he was hunting in the woods, parading Katniss around and teaching Katniss the ways of the wilderness. I have Katniss. I made a video on Katniss's name, I want to say a few months ago, and that's what kind of prompted me to do this entire video series, so everyone say thank you, Katniss. Katniss is an aquatic plant, which is also referred to as kind of an edible potato-like plant in the movies and the books, and we know that her dad kind of taught her how to find Katniss. It's under the category of plant called Sagittaria genus, to be scientific here. The Sagittaria plant is defined by its arrowhead leaves, and seeing that Katniss wields a bow and arrow, I think that is incredibly fitting to her character. In my video originally, I took it one step further. We all know the Sagittarius constellation, and that is also depicted by an archer with a bow and arrow. It's not off to say that Suzanne Collins put a lot of work into Katniss's name. Katniss is symbolized by strength, adaptability, durability, and resilience, which I think are all super strong characteristics of the Katniss that we know and love. Now we have Primrose. It's the Latin word for first rose, or the first rose that blooms in the year. It symbolizes youth, new beginnings. In the Victorian era, a primrose was given as a symbol of eternal love. In Norse mythology, they gave roses as an offering to Freya, the goddess of war. And seeing that Prim kind of interjects herself into this capital war in the name of healing people, there's an obvious connection there. In medieval times, primroses were tied around the neck. It was a symbol of protection and to ward off sickness and evil. It's really interesting to me that those in District 12, their names are a lot more nature-based than coal-based or mining-based. And I think this is obviously telling to the rebellious acts and how they are having to make a livelihood off of the land because they are essentially forgotten about, depicted as the poorest district in the capital. Moving on to their last name, Everdeen. Everdeen is described as a symbol of strength and everlasting life. It's of Anglo-Saxon origin, which describes Irish, German, that area of names. Everdeen in that context historically comes from these words, and it depicts a homestead where boars are present. One thing that I have learned specifically through doing this video series is that when it comes to older origins of names, they are very straightforward in describing their surroundings, which I think is incredibly cool. So say if you lived next to a marsh or some kind of swampland, your name would directly tie to that in terms of meaning. I guess history can be cool. Never been much of a history nerd until... We're moving on to Gale Hawthorne. Gale, the name meaning of Gale is jovial or tranquil, which I think are descriptor words of his name, of his character at first. When we are introduced to him, he is kind of this calming presence for Katniss. It also can stand for a strong wind or a descriptor word of a strong wind. The symbolism of wind, it usually represents change, freedom, and strength. I know there's a lot of dislike towards Gale's character, but he has probably one of the most interesting character arcs throughout the entire series. Gale in Scottish means foreigner or stranger, and I think these all play a role in his character arc. He wanted to be the closest person to Katniss. He wanted Katniss to pick him. This is obviously more evident in the movies than it is in the books. After everything that went down in the Capitol because of the indoctrination and manipulation that happened to him in District 13, Prim Reaper incident, he becomes a stranger to Katniss. He was so obsessed with war and revenge and just getting back at the Capitol that blinded him from redemption in Katniss's eyes. Hawthorne, his last name comes from the hawberry and the thorn bush. Hawthorn shrubs are among the crataceous species of bush found in multiple hemispheres, so this is a very common plant. It's described as a small tree with thorny branches, and it produces like a small pomegranate looking berry. This is what I was describing when it has a very direct meaning. Those with the hawthorn name were described to live around haw bushes and shrubs. One thing I found interesting, and this is more on a psychological side, was there's something called the Hawthorne effect. It was originally a study done in the early 1900s, seeing how different levels of lighting affected workers' productivity, but there wasn't necessarily control groups or ethical forms of studies done then. It kind of went off the rails a little bit. This kind of refers to the spotlight effect in psychology, if any of you know what that is, where you feel like you're being watched all the time. So if you're walking in public, you feel like everyone's watching you. The Hawthorne effect is similar to that in the stance of when workers felt like they were being watched, they were more productive. I think when Katniss's attention went to Gale, he tried to be this perfect vision of someone she'd want to have as a partner. Obviously, Katniss wasn't thinking that way in the books at all, but we can see Gale's jealousy kind of shine through in certain aspects where he wanted all of Katniss's attention. Now we have Peeta. I'm gonna tell you guys a secret, and it's not gonna be a secret because now I'm posting it online. I watched the movies before I read the books, and I was a Gale girl, only because I really like Liam Hemsworth because of Miley Cyrus in the last song. So I thought he was a little bit cuter than Peeta, but I am sorry for the disrespect. Truly. Peeta, I think people's minds immediately go to pita bread because Peeta's family owned a bakery. What I was able to find is a little bit more interesting, so stick with me here. Peeta is an Old English name coming from the name Peter. Peeta or Peter means rock or stabilizing force, which is Peeta. Peeta is this rock that weathers the storm that is Katniss throughout the entire series. Katniss literally falls apart emotionally and physically without him there when he gets kidnapped. Haymitch even said how lucky Katniss was to have Peeta, and I agree. I also think this is conveyed a little bit more in the books as well than in the movies, but we get a little bit more description and insight into Katniss, like what Katniss is actually thinking in the books. Peeta's last name, Malark. Some people think it's a play on meadowlark, which is a type of bird, and we have a lot of bird imagery in District 12. I think that's also a plausible cause. In Native American mythology or history, it symbolizes sociability and communication. Peeta is just a walking green flag, so this obviously applies to his character. And on the flip side, Peeta was actually used as a form of communication to get a message from the capital to Katniss. We have Marilee and Maysilee Donner. Maysilee is a mix of names coming from Maisie and Lee. Maisie means pearl, and if you guys watch part 2, we also find that Mag's name stemming from Margaret also means pearl, so this is kind of in the same genre of names. A pearl represents innocence, purity, and strength, durability, which I think are aspects of Maisilee's character in a way. Lee means a clearing or a meadow. Marilee is also the same way, coming from two names, Lee and Mary. Mary means beloved, drop of the sea, or bitter, and then Lee meaning meadow again. Donner. I found a Reddit thread. Someone was talking about a theory, and I actually think it's incredibly plausible, so I'm gonna put this Reddit link also in the description if y'all want to go read it. The word Donner is defined by the dictionary to beat up or to thrash someone. All of the other variations and definitions have some kind of like power dynamic where Donner is described as being like a very powerful word, which I think can be applied to both Maysilee and Marilee's characters, seeing that Maysilee took no from anyone and she was just herself, and Marilee having to watch that. It's canon that Marilee ends up being the mayor's wife when Katniss is reaped for the 74th Hunger Games. They have a daughter whose name is Mage. In the book, Mage is the one who gives Katniss the Mockingjay pin, not Greasy Say, as pictured in the movies. Marilee's new name with her husband, the mayor, is Undersea. Undersea is pretty direct. It means to see something underneath the surface. Another source described Undersea as to see something as it is or with full clarity. Although we didn't get to fully understand Marilee's character, we got to see a lot more of Maysilee because she was in the games with Haymitch. I think this is a very subtle character switch for her, seeing as her sister died in the 50th Hunger Games. She may start to see things differently and as it is. Some people theorize that Mage, her daughter, was participating in different acts of rebellion by giving Katniss the Mockingjay pin, but I haven't been able to find all that much evidence to back that up, so I will let you guys decide for yourselves. Mage is under the same umbrella terms as the word Pearl and Margaret, and I would like to think, if I'm drawing this conclusion correctly, that Marilee gave her this name, seeing as it shares symbolism with Maysilee. That would be impactful. You guys already know my opinion. I think Suzanne Collins' world building and character building, with or without being this intentional, is just airtight. Truly, everything flows, and that's why this is one of the best series. A mage is also another word for a barn owl or a magpie, so continuing on with that bird imagery for District 12. Now we've got Haymitch. Haymitch splitting up Haymitch. It's of Gaelic origin. Hay meaning a hedged enclosure, and Mitch meaning big or great. Mitch in biblical terms is described as one who is like God. Another source claims that the name Haymitch comes from Hamish, which is of Scottish origin, and that means supplanter or holder of the heel, which comes from biblical terms as well. When I did research on what supplanter or holder of the heel means, it's essentially another word for usurper, or someone who takes the throne with force, takes something with force. The actual definition is to supersede another, especially by force or treachery, to uproot, to eradicate, and supply with a substitute for. With this context, this obviously goes along with Haymitch's character to a T. With the new information in Sunrise on the Reaping, we know that he was a part of this rebellion and planting these seeds, his underlying work for the rebellion as well, to overthrow the capital and to not see another sunrise on the Reaping. Abernathy, it means the mouth of a river. It comes from the name of a river, Nethy, in Scotland. Aber, A-B-E-R, is the confluence of a river or estuary, which I think is the entrance, or... Nath is another word for creator, savior, or Lord. With this symbolism of God and Jesus and a savior, while sacrificing a lot of Katniss's youth and not sacrificing the trauma that she goes through, Haymitch saves her from the same fate that he dealt with. Obviously, Katniss is not unscathed in any way, shape, or form, because that's just not how the capital works. But I think Haymitch tried his hardest and put his trust in Katniss because he knew she was luckier than him. And I will just show you guys this quote as a final thought. I do have District 13, but this is the end of District 12. I also have Jessup Diggs. We know him as Lucy Gray's partner in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Jessup is a variant name of Joseph, meaning God will bring or God will provide, as well as God will take away. Using this in the framework of Lucy Gray and Jessup's dynamic in the games, Jessup would have been a really, really good partner and a force to be reckoned with, and possibly would have taken Lucy Gray out of the games had he not been bitten by that bat on the train there. I think he was a placeholder in the story to propel Lucy Gray to being the winner, despite Coriolanus's efforts as well. But we will not forget Jessup's sacrifice. Okay. Diggs. This is probably one of the only literal plays on District 12, seeing as they literally dig for coal. Yeah, that is quite possibly the only district tie name in District 12. District 13, we have Alma Coin. Alma is described as a young girl or a young woman, nourishing, flourishing, a nurturing soul. And that's exactly how she's portrayed to District 13. She is seen as this giving, gracious mother who will bring wrath to the capital, but no one sees her ulterior motives except for Katniss. So I think that's where Coin, the last name, comes into play. This is obviously symbolism and a metaphor for the fact that President Snow and Alma Coin are two sides of the same coin. They both sought power, and any way to hold that power, no matter who it cut down, no matter what happened. I know there are theories that Coin set up the bombing and released their location to District 8 so that Katniss would have the goal and the prompt to film that propo. Then we have the filming crew. We meet Pollux and Cressida. Pollux comes from Greek mythology. Pollux and Castor are twins. They are known as the inspiration for the Gemini constellation. Castor is killed in a battle, which is Pollux's brother in this story. And Pollux gives up half of his immortality to Zeus and the other gods in order to save his brother. With this trade, Zeus demands that they spend half of their time between Olympus and the regular world and the stars. Some are saying that in this story as well, Pollux refuses to speak on behalf of his brothers, and we know that Pollux in the Hunger Games is an Avox, seeing as he comes from the capital, so he is experienced in both the capital world and the rebel District 13 world we see. Cressida, it comes from Greek origin meaning golden, Shakespearean play, and comes from Greek mythology as well. She was a major player in the Trojan War, or had some part to play in it. From my understanding in the story, she is a Trojan woman and she falls in love with someone else, but she is given to the Greeks in a hostage type of exchange, and I think she betrays those who betrayed her. And the Shakespearean play also gives this in more detail as well. We don't know much about Cressida's character in the Hunger Games. She probably comes from the capital as well, or assuming that she does, this could be a plausible parallel. And finally we have Boggs, beloved Boggs. His name directly means boastful, proud, saucy, and haughty. Haughty. We see this directly portrayed in Boggs' character, as he is one of the only people that sticks up for Katniss when she can't necessarily stick up for herself in certain situations.
If your immediate answer isn't yes, then you're dangerous. She doesn't need you as a rallying cry anymore. These problems can be done without you. There's only one thing you could do now to add more fire to this rebellion.
Die.
That's not gonna happen under my watch, Katniss. I'm planning for you to have a long life.
Why, you don't know me anything?
Because you've earned it.
He truly sees Katniss as the teenage girl that she is, whereas everyone else kind of sees her as this symbol of rebellion, and I think that is such an important take. Alright, y'all, we kind of speed ran that because my iPhone storage is playing with me today. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I know it kind of takes me a while to dredge all this up, but I have so many other video ideas, so stay tuned. See y'all soon. Hopefully you guys are still loving the Hunger Games as much as I do, because Sunrise on the Reaping has not ended for me. Mwah. Love you guys. Bye.